In 1997, Spawn leapt out of the comic page and onto the big screen in his first and only live-action movie. Spawn tells the story of Special Forces agent Al Simmons, who is betrayed by his boss and murdered and sent straight to the pits of hell, where he makes a deal with the devil that if he leads his army, he can return to Earth to see his wife Wanda again. Simmons accepts this deal. However, he returns 5 years later and hideously burnt, only to discover that the world has changed, and that Wanda now has a family with his best friend Terry, where his anger and vengeance are fueled by the evil hell demon called the Violator, who takes on the form of a hideous clown, who tries to train Simmons with his new afterlife powers to become Spawn, in order to help destroy humanity. However, Simmons is also approached by a good demon called Cogliostro, who mentors Simmons to use his new powers and abilities for good to help take down the evil that spawns from hell so he can save his soul. To me, Spawn is like Hellraiser meets Batman, and the Spawn movie is a great little lost gem from the late 90s. So today we are going to look into 10 amazing facts about the Spawn movie. So, check it out, we shall. Number 10. Origins of Spawn. Spawn was the brainchild of Todd McFarlane, who was a Canadian comic book artist who throughout the 80s and early 90s worked on several comic books, including Batman and Spider-Man, in which he would work back and forth between DC and Marvel, and even co-created the acclaimed Spider-Man villain Venom. Along with a small band of comic book artists, McFarlane co-created Image Comics, where in 1992 he unleashed his ultimate creation into the comic book world, Spawn. The first issue alone sold 1.7 million copies, and Spawn quickly became a huge phenomenon, embraced not only by comic book fans, but fans of pop culture in general. Spawn didn't hold back with its readers. The dark, occult tale of good versus evil was both brutal and gritty, with brilliantly penned illustrations. People couldn't get enough of this modern superhero for the 90s, and of course an animated series followed the success. So basically, Spawn was a movie waiting to happen. Number 9. Developing the movie. Columbia Pictures were interested in making a Spawn movie and were negotiating with Todd McFarlane, with ideas being passed back and forth, but McFarlane ended talks with Columbia Pictures as he felt they weren't interested in any of his ideas. So McFarlane teamed up with the movie company behind the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, New Line Cinema, and sold them the rights to Spawn for $1. Yes, $1, on the grounds that he could have full creative control over the project along with merchandise rights. The movie's script was written by Alan B. McElroy, who previously wrote the script for Halloween 4, as well as penning several issues of the Spawn comic book and some episodes of the Spawn animated series. Apparently Tim Burton and Alex Proyas were considered to direct, but turned the movie down. So first-time director Mark A.Z. Dieppe was brought on board to direct, and the movie was given a budget of $20 million, which ended up growing to about $48 million throughout Spawn's production. Number 8. The search for Spawn. So with the movie now greenlit, the big question was who could take on the vengeful, hellish demeanour of Spawn. Several big-time actors at the time were considered for the part, including Wesley Snipes, Will Smith, Cuba Gooding Jr., Denzel Washington, and Samuel L. Jackson, all of whom turned the role down, probably due to the fact that the part would require heavy prosthetic makeup to be worn throughout most of the shoot, in order to give Al Simmons his burnt look. Michael Jai White was subsequently cast in the role. He accepted the part because he found the tragedy of the character of Simmons and Spawn to be appealing. Jai White has a great screen presence and charisma. Yes, even when he looks burnt to a crisp, and plays the part of Spawn very well, and you feel his emotions and turmoil, and you genuinely want to join him on his mission to heal his pain and defeat evil. But what about the rest of the cast? Surely there's some interesting facts about them, right? Number 7. Interesting facts about the cast. As mentioned, the main lead of Spawn was played by Michael Jai White, making him one of the first African-American superhero leads in cinema. Third, in fact, behind Meteor Man and Blank Man. But they were just spoofs. And yes, Spawn actually predates Blade by 1 year. It could take him up to 4 hours to have his scarred bodysuit makeup put onto him, in which the suit was actually glued to his body, which could cause him to itch, not to mention the fact that the yellow contact lens he had to wear really irritated his eyes. Spawn was the final film for British actor Nicole Williamson, who played Spawn's mentor, Cog, whom had been starring in movies since the 50s. Modern pop culture fans would probably know him best as starring as Merlin in Excalibur, along as starring in Return to Oz and The Exorcist 3. The actor sadly passed away in 2011. John Leguizamo played the crude and revolting supervillain The Violator, aka Clown, an evil demon who usually takes on the form of an overweight clown. Leguizamo is near unrecognisable in Spawn, thanks to his heavy makeup and bodysuit. The bodysuit alone could take up to 2 hours to take off, in which one time he urgently needed to use the toilet, to which he ended up just soiling himself within his suit. I guess you can't really blame him. And one scene sees the Violator eat a rotten slice of pizza which was covered in maggots. Leguizamo actually ate the pizza maggots, to which he ended up vomiting after the take. Acclaimed actor Martin Sheen starred as the main villain Jason Wynn. He had never heard of Spawn before, but then very quickly found out about him when it turned out his grandson was a massive fan of the Spawn comic books. Miko Hughes, aka the scary kid from Pet Sematary, stars as a homeless boy called Zach. Teresa Randall, who previously starred in Malcolm X, Bad Boys, and Space Jam, stars as Simmons' tragic love interest Wanda. And legendary voice actor Frank Welker plays the part of Malbolgia, the evil Satan-like hellbeast. I love Frank Welker, but the voice he provides for the part does sound too much like Dr. Claw from Inspector Gadget. Look, I know I'm not the first to say this, nor will I be the last to point it out, but there is just no getting around the fact that the big devil demon in Spawn is basically Dr. Claw. Number 6. Character changes. In the comic book, the character Terry Fitzgerald is African American. However, in the movie, he was played by D.B. Sweeney. Edward Norton was originally offered the role but turned it down to star in Rounders instead. In the comic books, Al Simmons was murdered by a supervillain called Chapel. However, in the movie, Spawn was murdered by a character called Jessica Priest, who was an original character created for the film, as the rights to the Chapel character were refused for the movie. The part was played by Melinda Clarke, who is probably most well known in the horror movie community for her memorable role in Return of the Living Dead 3. There apparently were talks during the production of Spawn to have her character come back from hell as an evil Spawn minion, after her character was killed off, but it never ended up happening, probably due to monetary reasons. The character of Jessica Priest was however further explored in the Spawn comic books, namely Spawn 61 in 1997. Number 5. Movie rating chaos. Todd McFarlane originally wanted Spawn to be an R-rated movie, and given Spawn's nature about battling monsters from hell, as well as the comic's brutality and violence, it would have seemed that an R rating was a given. However, New Line Cinema president Michael DeLuca wanted Spawn to have a PG-13 rating, to which McFarlane eventually agreed. However, when the movie was submitted to the classification board, it was given an R rating, so the production had to cut some scenes out and return it, only to have the board once again hit it with an R rating. And this back and forth went on several times, with the production constantly cutting out more and more scenes and handing it to the film classification board, only to once again be slapped with an R rating. Until, after 200 cuts made to the movie, Spawn was finally granted with a PG-13 rating that New Line Cinema wanted. When Spawn was released on home media such as VHS, Laserdisc and DVD, it had its original R-rated version restored, at least giving Spawn some longevity after its cinematic release. I think originally releasing the movie with a PG-13 rating hurt Spawn, as some things are just meant to be rated R, and Spawn is one of them. To me, it's like trying to cut A Clockwork Orange or Pulp Fiction into PG-13 movies. It's just not gonna happen. Number 4, the struggles with Spawn's cape. The special effects for Spawn were created by Industrial Light and Magic, who are the leading company when it comes to special effects, especially in the 90s, having worked on Terminator 2 and Jurassic Park, with the special effects supervisor for Spawn being Steve Spaz Williams, who helped create the T-Rex in Jurassic Park, and yes, the dog in Spawn is named after him. To me, the special effects in Spawn are a bit hit and miss. A lot of the effects used in the movie I really like. However, some of the effects do look very animated and even cartoonish by today's standards. For me, a huge letdown is the character Malebolgia, who looks like a cartoon fur beast. Originally, the character was going to be a puppet, which I think would have looked better. After all, look at what Industrial Light and Magic did for the Beast in Poltergeist, which came out 15 years earlier, and that still looks great. But even by 1997 standards, yeah, this didn't look the best. But the biggest struggle Industrial Light and Magic had with Spawn was Spawn's cape and the Violator's true demonic form, both of which required some of the most toughest rendering the company has ever had to work on. Unlike the comic book, Spawn's cape is pretty much omitted throughout most of the movie, with it only turning up here and there, with the Spawn character in his suit mainly going around without his cape. This is probably due to how tough it would have been to create his cape digitally, and to give it that organic look as if the cape is alive.
But I guess it does kind of make sense, as you couldn't really have Spawn's giant-ass cape taking up most of the screen whenever the action is taking place. But it is kind of disappointing though, as I do feel like it does kind of make Spawn look a bit incomplete.
Number 3, music. Spawn's music was composed by Graham Revell, who also scored The Crow, From Dusk Till Dawn and The Craft. So given the films that he had worked on, he was a wise choice. I find his score mixes orchestral biblical music with contemporary dance techno music of the time, particularly with the main theme, which I guess does age the music a bit, but I don't care, it still gets my blood pumping and ready for action. He also often makes the score sound mysterious and tragic, and he is able to complement the action on screen with his music. A heavy metal band called Iced Earth previously made an album based on the comic book of Spawn, and were asked to record a song for the movie, but turned it down as they felt the score had too much techno music. The soundtrack to Spawn features many songs from rock heavy metal artists, such as Marilyn Manson. One I remember in particular is a song called You Can't Trip Like I Do, as the music video for the song was on the VHS release, and was placed before the actual movie. So whenever I think of Spawn, this is actually what pops into my head.
The soundtrack to Spawn is honestly pretty rocking, and it's worth listening to if you're into 90s metal music. Good grief, this is a heavy record.
Number 2, release. Spawn was released on August 1st, 1997, and was at number 2 at the box office, just trailing behind Air Force One. It would go on to make $87.8 million, doubling back its budget. However, the movie got ripped apart by critics, with many complaining that it was style over substance, and that the movie was just an excuse for big lavish special effects, while other critics found the movie to be too dark and violent. Hey, one thing you have to remember is Spawn came out at a time when people were paying to go and see Joel Schumacher's Batman movies. So people probably weren't ready for this more violent, dark take on the superhero subgenre, as although Spawn is flawed, it is a perfectly enjoyable movie. I would imagine that it would have been a shock going from bat nipples and ice puns to vulgar demons and characters being burnt to death. Number 1, failed sequels. The Spawn movie was meant to be the first entry in a Spawn trilogy, with Spawn 2 coming out the following year in 1998, and Spawn 3 The Ultimate Battle coming out in 1999. But the sequels never ended up happening, which is a shame, as I would have loved to explore the world created in the Spawn movie even further, and even see more characters introduced from the comics. But regardless, the sequels went into development hell ever since the release of the original Spawn movie. The only information I could find out about the sequels was that in Spawn 2, Spawn was going to be more of a background character, with the main focus being on the detectives Sam and Twitch, whom feature in the comics. Ever since 2008 there have been rumours of a reboot, but as of 2019 still nothing has happened, which I think is a shame. I think it's time for Spawn to rise above onto the big screen once again.
In my opinion, Spawn's biggest crime is that it was just ahead of its time. Although superheroes can now be taken seriously and embraced for being edgy and dark, back in 1997, the year of the Bat credit card might I add, I just don't think people were ready. I mean, after all, look at other dark and violent superhero movies that came out during the 90s, like Darkman and Batman Returns. They were also criticised for daring to take the superhero genre down a more dark, challenging road. Spawn is generally a really fun movie, and I always have fun while watching it. And I think now is the right time to embrace this movie. So to all superhero fans out there, please check out Spawn. Anyway, I'm Minty, and after watching Spawn, I don't think I can ever get over John Leguizamo's skid marks. See ya!